Chapter 41. Employment and workforce relations are another important strand of our social dimension. In contemporary New Zealand, participation in the paid workforce and being considered economically productive is often the measure of a person's worth. A return to the workforce is frequently seen as the true gauge of a person's recovery. The return to paid employment, like for many people recovering from a significant absence from the workforce, has been a big issue for me. It's sat out there, unattainable but beckoning, and for a long time I didn't believe I could judge my recovery a success unless I could hold down a job. I viewed the nursing course as a symbol of forward momentum towards this goal, and hence toward a return to some semblance of normal living. I relished the prospect of one day moving off the breadline of welfare poverty. I also felt I needed to work for reasons other than purely financial, such as regaining some self-esteem and a sense of purpose. So I persevered with this goal for a long time. The structure of the welfare benefit system in New Zealand acts as a disincentive for people with a mental illness to attempt a return to paid employment. For many people with health issues, part-time work is the most realistic, yet the losses incurred through secondary tax on the paid job and benefit abatement levels that increase in relation to the secondary taxed earnings can lead to the illogical situation where it is not financially beneficial to take the job, especially if there are costs involved such as transport to and from work, lunch money and clothing to buy. There is some financial assistance available through Work and Income New Zealand, or WINZ, to help the person into the job, but it doesn't kick in unless the person is working 15 hours or more per week. Many people are scared to let go of their benefit completely because if the return to work isn't successful or they become unwell again, they fear finding themselves financially cut off. The recent establishment of an employment trial period is a useful response to this, as it enables people on an invalid's benefit to have their benefits suspended for 6 months if they take on paid employment. If the job doesn't work out, they can return to the benefit without having to go through the agonising bureaucracy of starting from scratch. But really, it is the issue of paying secondary tax on the paid job which is probably the biggest impediment to moving people off illness-related benefits and into the workforce. I believe that a change in policy here would have immediate effect in reducing the size of the benefit drain on state fiscal resources. Most welfare recipients with long-term health issues are on an invalid's benefit. In the past, an invalid's benefit was for life, but contemporary thinking has changed and people with health and disability issues are credited with being able to play some role in the economic life of society. It is interesting how when the concept of recovery has financial implications for the state, the paradigm is embraced with open arms. Most people I know on benefits are hugely grateful for the assistance they receive from the state. However, the gap between going from being unwell and having no employment to having full-time employment as the next rung on the ladder of a viable, livable source of income is just too great for a lot of people to transition between. It sets up a vulnerable group of people to fail unnecessarily. Rewarding part-time work for people on illness-related benefits, either through the tax system or through changes to the abatement levels, would create a far more realistic and sustainable way for people with mental illness to engage in the paid workforce. During my nursing training, I grappled constantly with the issue of self-disclosure. I could never figure out the correct formula of how much was too much to tell people about myself, or whether it was better to say nothing and feign normality. Sometimes I made attempts to share parts of my story with other students, but somewhere along the way they would begin to look at me aghast and probably wondered what on earth I was doing on the course. Paid employment and workplace relationships expose the dilemma of what to tell to an even greater degree. Attempting to return to the workforce after mental ill health, there were always these questions. Do I answer the health questions on the application form truthfully, knowing that will quite likely get mine chucked in the waste paper bin? Do I lie on the form? Do I conceal through omission? Do I hope that the employer will be so wowed by me at the interview that they won't care? And what about sick leave? What will I tell them if I become unwell and need time off? Is depression an acceptable reason to be absent from work? Seeking employment can be a minefield, and I have much respect for those who've been able to make a successful transition back into the workforce after serious mental ill health. To be honest though, I don't know many people who have. Finding our place in the world and amongst others after the separation of illness and hospitalisation can be among the hardest parts of choosing the recovery road. It can take time and courage to be willing to expose our vulnerabilities, wade through the stigma, or even to want to set foot in the outside world. My experience has been that in our money-obsessed society there is much stigma attached to being out of the paid workforce. You automatically lose the aura of respectability that goes with employment, and I have at times felt this far more strongly than the stigma of the actual mental illness, which says a lot. Public health strategies in New Zealand, such as the Like Minds, Like Mine media campaign, have done a lot to raise awareness of the stigma and negative beliefs attached to people with mental illness. Being mad is gaining some degree of social acceptability, but being out of work, that's another matter entirely. I know only too well that awkward pause when someone asks me, "And what do you do?" Well, I think to myself in these situations, do you really want to know?